Put my mic on. Welcome to the Finance Committee meeting of Thursday, September 14th, 2023, and we will now call this meeting to order. Before we begin, though, as is our tradition, we will read the land acknowledgement to you. The Niagara region and Grimsby are situated on treaty land. This land is steeped in the rich history of the First Nations, such as the Hattawanarak, the Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabe, including the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. There are many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people from across Turtle Island that live and work in Niagara today. The regional municipality of Niagara and the town of Grimsby stand with all Indigenous peoples, past and present, in promoting the wise stewardship of the lands on which we live. Now we will move on to item number 3 on our agenda, which is to ask if there are any disclosures of pecuniary or non-pecuniary interest at this time from the committee members. I'm seeing nothing. Do we have any councillors on Zoom at the moment? I know we were waiting for someone. Councillor Bradzi is linked into us.
Yes, from what I can see, he is.
Okay.
Oh, there we go.
Okay, thank you. Good to know. Then we will move on to item 4, which is the approval of the agenda. And could I have someone move and second that to approve the agenda this evening? Member Hutchings and Member Scandinavo. Then resolved that the September 14th, 2023 Finance Committee agenda be approved. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Thank you. That is carried. Before we continue on with the agenda, though, I'm going to diverge for just a moment because I would like to introduce to everyone here our incoming treasurers, Ms. Stephanie Nagel, who has joined the town of Grimsby, and her first day was Monday, and yeah, drinking from a fire hose. Thursday already, she has a finance meeting and has joined us. Stephanie has considerable experience working in municipal government, most recently with the region of Peel, but has also been with many different municipalities of a smaller size than that too. Certainly, I think the Township of West Lincoln, the Town of Lincoln, the City of Welland. So I'd like to think she's coming back to her roots here in Grimsby. Certainly, you know, has a very fair and extensive background in operating in capital budgets, in policy analysis, financial reporting, and so on. And she did share with me the other day that she also sits on, and let me make sure I get this right, the finance officers, the Municipal Finance Officers Association, as well as the Government Finance Officers Association. So really opens another door to know what other municipalities are doing as well, in addition to her experience with a number of municipalities. And so welcome. Stephanie is a CPA as well, and has, besides an undergrad degree, which is required in order to become a CPA, but she also holds her master's in public administration as well. So welcome, Stephanie. We're looking forward to working with you. Tonight, Angela Stefani has joined me on my left here because Katie, our deputy clerk, is working remotely via Zoom this afternoon. So I have a new assistant to my left. Thank you.
If I can, Madam Chair,
absolutely.
I'd like to say I've had the pleasure of working with Stephanie in the past, and Peel's loss is our gain. But I also want to and welcome aboard, but I also like to thank Angela very much for holding the ship together the last 4 or 5 months. You've done a remarkable job in the audits and all the other work in keeping us on the straight and narrow. So thank you very much.
Thank you. We all would like to echo those kind words too. At this point in time, we're then going to move to item 5 on our agenda, which is the receipt of our previous minutes. And so you haven't circulated the finance minutes of July 13th, 2023. as well as the GDAC minutes of August 3rd and December 7th. Could I have a mover and a seconder? And then certainly if there are any questions, we can move into them at that time. Councillor Charwa would move.
5:07 p.m.
A seconder for that, please, before we have any discussion. Lay member Scandinavo. Then before we actually call for a vote on them, yes, do you have a question, Councillor Charwa?
Yes, through you, Chair, thank you. My question is where we stand on this. So I know with the Grimsby, with the GDAC, Grimsby Economic Development Advisory Committee, there's been a lot of, it seems like the focus seems to be on a tourism strategy. And, you know, I went back through the documents, strategic priorities, tourism is not one of them. So council at no time said that we were going to focus on tourism and putting any money into tourism. However, in both the last, you know, in AMO, that was a delegation, and then in both of these last meetings, I don't know if there's been money spent towards tourism. There's going to be a request coming up. And then we also have some kind of tourism. We have somebody coming in doing a brainstorming session for 2 to 3 hours. Our highest paid staff members are also sitting usually in this GDAC meeting. So I'm just wondering where we are as far as what input we can give as a committee, because this is not a priority of the town. This is just seems to become something that could have possibly come from this committee.
I'm going to say I don't have an answer for that. I too don't sit on GDAC, just like you don't. So I hear your question. At this point in time, we're just approving the minutes, but I hear your concern. Perhaps the best way to address that is at the time when finance report goes to council and when we go to approve the minutes for this meeting, that might be appropriate to have you pull that item at that time and then speak to your concerns about it. Yeah? Do you think that would be sort of the process and would work for you?
That's fine with me. I don't want this to go kind of to the next step as if we approved it, because I don't approve of what's been happening in the last little while, and I would like to have discussion and see where council stands on this. So whatever procedurally we need to do in order to bring this up at some point, that'd be fine.
Yeah, I think the appropriate way to do that is just to pull that part of our finance minutes at that time and speak about it. Because really our role now is by and large just to receive the minutes from that particular subcommittee. So then I will read the resolution. So resolved.
If I can, just
Oh, for sure.
maybe
Yes.
add the conversation. I mean, when you look at the terms of reference, it says, you know, amongst many, many things, and then at the very end, it says advisory committees reporting to finance standing committee, and it's one's GDAC, and that's why the minutes are coming here. But what does reporting to mean? Are we overseeing or reporting to? So it's right now, it's just reports are coming here, but what sort of exercise authority or what it's confusing. So with the minutes coming here, so I agree with Councillor Charwa, on the comments as well.
Yes, thank you. So resolved that the following minutes be received: the Finance Committee minutes of July 13th, 2023, and the GDAC Committee minutes of August 3rd and September 7th, 2023. Could I have a show of hands for all those in favor? Thank you, that is carried. Item number 6 on our agenda are delegations and presentations, of which we have none this evening. Item number 7 is we do have a consent report on the second quarter financial update, and I'm going to ask if anyone has any particular questions that they wish to ask our staff, because in that case, we'll need a resolution to lift this in order to have questions rather than just passing it as a consent item. So does anyone have any questions about this particular report? There will be?
I have
Okay.
one or two, yeah.
And Member Scandinavo as well. So So at this point, we're going to skip that particular motion to approve it. Instead, we're going to call for a motion basically to have it lifted to discuss it. So I do, pardon?
Sorry, here, one moment. Let me just come on the screen here. So
Thank
we
you.
don't need, we don't need a motion to lift it. It's really just, we're going to consider it with the regular order under discussion reports. So, yeah, we'll just, I guess, if Member Hutchings and Member Scandinavo both have questions about it, they can move in second. And then that gets that item on the floor for discussion. You have your discussion, and then you'll read the resolution afterwards. If that clears things up.
Thank you. Does that work for everyone? So Member Hutchings will make the motion, Member Scandinavo will second it, and then all those in favor to take it off the consent agenda and to have discussion about it. If you could raise your hand, please. Thank you. Okay, then, not sure who had their hand up first here, but I'll start with, they're both saying either one. We'll start with Member Hutchings and his questions on the report.
Just one question. First of all, I want to say to the management team, congratulations. You know, it's to manage an organization and have a surplus. It's not in the opposite direction. So kudos to your management team and keep staying within budget and all that sort of stuff. That's always a big deal. And any board or council, you want to make sure they're in budget. So my question is, you know, and I know it was accrual on the financial statements. There was a $4.7 million surplus last year on the accrual financial statements, not on the modified accrual, which we report on here. And now we're at a $1.2 million, surplus looking at end of the year. Has there been any trending? Like I remember in 2019, taxes went up quite a bit. It was close to 9 or 10%, and quite a bit in 2020 and 2021. Have we had any? It'd be interesting to juxtapose the surpluses versus the tax increases, and are we over budgeting to get these surpluses? And I'm just curious to juxtapose those two things. What the tax rates increase and what our surpluses have been, just to see if there's been an over budget every year by year to achieve those surpluses. And if it's purposeful and we're trying to use those surplus reserves, let's put them in reserves versus over budgeting. But I'm just curious of that correlation. We had a big surplus last year, and it looks like we're going to have a decent sized one this year. I just want to make sure that we're not over budgeting to find ourselves in a surplus.
Angela, would you like to respond to that?
Sure. Through you, Madam Chair, last year, through the modified accrual method, we actually ended up transferring up roughly $860,000 to reserves. In comparison, now we're looking at about $1.2 million to reserves. We haven't done a correlation, but I think in this year, for example, we do have more of a rationale as to the impacts of these, one being the interest rate being higher than we had anticipated. Looking at the market condition when we were budgeting, we anticipated the interest rates based on the forecast at that time to be lower than where they stand today, so that was one of the drivers. As well, when we budget for wages, we look at full year complement. We don't budget partway through the year. We always want to have that full wage in, so we're not impacting future budget years. So last year we did include new staffing, and again, those were hired partway through the year, so we're seeing gapping there. And then again, we're seeing gapping with just the market conditions. We're seeing a lot of flip-flopping in positions, and unfortunately, and that's driving a lot of these variances as well. So typically, I think everything else is pretty online, but those are the main drivers here.
Thank you.
Do you have any other questions before I give Mr. Scandinavo an opportunity?
I actually think you answered both my questions. One had to do with the interest rate, and the other had to do with the timing of positions. It seems like a lot of these surpluses are related to vacancies, and just considering the timing of that. But I think you've captured both of those. So thanks very much, Angela.
Are there any other questions from any other council members here? I realize a few of you just walked in quickly. So we are on item number 7, which is the Q2 report that talks about actual and budget expenses and the projected surplus for the year. Does anyone have any other questions on that? then I'm going to take the opportunity to ask a question. Angela's chuckling. She says, I know. I give everyone else a chance first, and then I always go last. But certainly on the terms of reference for our Finance Committee is listed the need to address and to look at the adequacy of our reserves. And by and large, the town and other municipalities' policies always are that whatever surpluses they have get transferred into reserves, and we know why that takes place and why that step is done. But I think it would be good if, before we get into the budget, we actually had an analysis from our finance staff about our reserves, call it a projection of our reserves even, an analysis of how that compares to, the standards or the goals that we have for those reserves, to know if we really, have enough, too much, not enough, right? Certainly the trend in the last number of years has been that we've been able to build up our reserves a fair bit through COVID and so on. That really, I'll say, assisted us. That's how it turned out. But would that be possible, before Christmas, let's say, before we really, really get into the budget process itself, to have a report from our finance staff that, looks at the adequacies of our reserves or has comments or concerns that you'd like to bring to the committee's attention? I'm going to put Stephanie on the spot here and ask you directly.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do have to go through the reserve policy. I'm not sure that we actually have adequacy levels set within the current policy, but we can look at that. What I'd suggest is we can look at the trends and look at where we're sitting in balances and get some idea in terms of where we're sitting from a percentage perspective. I have done reserve adequacies in other municipalities, and it's a little bit different for everyone. So we might want to bring a policy forward on that piece down the road, but we can definitely put together something for the budget this year and then probably work on expanding that out next year.
One of the roles of the Finance Committee has been to, when I say assist, is, bring forward to the Committee of the Whole, the Budget Committee, any concerns or things that we think need to be emphasized based upon our perspective and training and background here. So it'd be good to have that in place even before the Budget Committee of the Whole starts to look at the whole budget, right? To really know what we think about our reserves and where we are. And you're right, this is never a one-off. This is something we have to do perpetually. Would it be reasonable, with everything else on your plate, give us a time frame? Like, would it be reasonable to aim for December's finance meeting, perhaps? That would be literally 3 months from now, and I realize you've just started.
I hate to overcommit myself, but yes, we can definitely look at it over the next few months and come back and have some ideas and suggestions that we can talk through with the committee as a whole, and then bring it for budget purposes.
Member Hutchings?
Here, there we are. I'm just wondering if, Stephanie, worry about you overcommit. You haven't seen probably the capital asset management work at all, have you? Yeah, so that's going to be the big challenge, trying to match up that with your reserves. So, maybe.
That's why I'm thinking this is not something for October's meeting. This requires some really in-depth analysis here by our staff, and so we need to give them some time to do that. Okay. Does anybody have any other questions about that particular report then? Finance Report 23-25. Then if there are no other, yes, Member Scan.
I just had a quick question about, how do we validate the adequacies of the reserve? Like, if I think about it, in terms of, let's say, like a pension plan, you have an actuary that sort of steps in and says, here's our actuarial assessment and here's where, your balances are. So, there's multiple reserves here. So, what are we looking for in terms of, getting that reassurance that, hey, these reserves are adequate, right? I mean, there's likely dozens and dozens of factors to consider. And I'm just curious, we've asked for something for a future meeting, but maybe I'm jumping the gun, but how do we ask for something maybe a little more specific?
I'm going to refer that to our treasurer, as she has much more experience in it. So, Stephanie?
Yes, thank you, through the chair. Reserve adequacy is different in every municipality. It's going to depend on, there has to be decisions made from the committee and council as well in terms of how they feel about it. Normally, you would do this kind of in phasing, so you'd look at, you've got, your tax rate stabilization, those types of things that are common amongst municipalities, and you can feel those pieces out a bit more. When we're looking at things like capital and infrastructure related, there is no right and wrong answer on an adequacy. You want to look at where you want to be. Normally, those are longer term commitments, and you're not going to have an adequate amount of money sitting aside for all of your capital replacements over the next 10 to 20 years. But you can make plans to put money aside each year that helps to build those reserves up. So there's a bit of life cycle piece in there, and there's adequacy. It's kind of more of an art to some degree. But we can definitely look at the best way to approach this. So I think I need to sit down and look at what we have, first of all. And asset management plans are part of that. And then, the other side is investments and how that is looking as well. So there's a whole number of pieces that have to go into that, but there is work that's been done out there that we can kind of leverage as well. So what I'd suggest is that we'll go back and we'll take a look at that, see what we can come back with for, in a few months' time, and then go from there. But council and committee also have to make some decisions around where they want to see those things sit at as well, right? Because that does affect the budget and the next steps as well, so.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, no, thank you. Thank you, that's what I expected, thank you.
Okay, then I will read the resolution. So resolved that financial report 23-25 of 2023, the second quarter financial update dated September 14th, 2023 today, be received for information. All those in favor? That is carried. Then we will, from here, move on to item 8.2. 8.2 basically is our tax write-off report. Pardon me. Does anyone have any questions on it? We have certainly seen this in previous meetings. If there are no questions specifically about that, then if I could have someone move that we approve this, and a seconder, please. So a mover, Councillor Charwa. Councillor Bradzi has seconded that. Then resolved that report Finance 23-26 of 2023, tax write-offs, which is dated today, September 14th, be received, and that the total tax write-offs of $4,518.54, as outlined in Appendix A to that report, be approved. All those in favor? That's carried. I would like to share with the committee that, prior to this meeting, Angela, Stephanie, and I had met to go over the agenda and things like that, and we were talking about the tax write-offs, and Stephanie had shared with us that in many other municipalities, every single one doesn't come individually to finance or to council, and so I agree that it is there's nothing we can do about these tax write-offs as a committee. They are simply a formality, and then in other municipalities, they have basically delegated that authority to the finance staff to go forward with the report, I guess, once a year that comes. And so that is one of the items also on Stephanie's list with Angela, to come back with a policy and for us to consider that perhaps that function of having to formally approve at each meeting will simply be delegated to our financial staff, and we'll save the really big, tough stuff for the committee itself. Then we will move on to item number
Can I just ask a
9.
question, Madam Chair?
Sure.
So will the delegation of authority come back, not piecemeal, but we'll be looking at it in totality of delegation of authority for staff?
Stephanie, go ahead.
Sorry, through the chair. I haven't looked at all of the authorities yet. This was just one that I saw right off the top in my first purview. I would like to bring this one back to committee sooner rather than later, just because it does hold up the refunds to those residents as well. So, but we will look at all of the delegated authorities, and what we have and what we don't have for sure in the next, several months, and we'll come back with some suggestions.
Member Scandinavo?
I do agree with the delegation to, to a certain degree. However, should we assign like a materiality to it as well? Like, I mean, ultimately, I do understand that a lot of this is rooted in bylaw or rooted in some sort of, pre-approved methodology. However, is there any merit in assigning some sort of materiality to it? Or should we, just see it, delegate the authority and just see it annually?
Stephanie? Sorry, Stephanie, would you like to answer that?
Through the chair, for this one in particular, I don't really think we need to put a level of authority, a dollar value to it. It's already kind of assessed through the organization and comes back to us. So MPAC has already seen it. It's already gone through. What I would suggest is that we will still continue to report back to the committee and provide a list of the write-offs. And obviously, if anything material was happening, we would make sure that the committee knows. So although we would have delegated authority to move forward on it, there's not a lot of leeway to not approve these. So it's really just a bit of a rubber stamp to some degree. So, but definitely if we saw anything material and we were concerned, we would bring that back.
And as one of our staff mentioned, of course, in many cases, the property tax, the owners of the property continue to pay their property taxes, but there could have been a fire on their property or whatever. They continue to pay their property taxes at the higher rates because the write-off hasn't gone through yet. So on the one hand, we're taking money from them when we owe them money too. And so the faster we can make these things align, the better for the members in our community too, right? Councillor Vardy, do you have a question?
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. Most of our tax write-offs are, as such, properties that have had fire or they've been demolished or something. Do we ever, and I know it's not a fair question to you in week one, but what if somebody hasn't paid their taxes in a couple years? Just a simple, they just didn't pay them. Do we have a list? Do we try to collect? Do we... And I guess that would be something that I would like to see come to council. The other stuff, the fires that have gone through MPAC and had all that approval, to me, I don't think we need to see them. There's nothing about them really there, and it is about people getting their money back as opposed to, but what if somebody, what if I don't pay my taxes for a couple of years? What happens?
I'm going to jump in even before Stephanie does, but go ahead, Stephanie, go first. By all means, go first.
Thank you, Councillor, through the chair. So there are processes under legislation that we follow. Now, I have to check with Ange what our, what the process is here, but there are tax sale processes. I mean, that's the ultimate when you go through. But they is legislated, so there's steps that municipalities take. So there are collection processes, letters, and at some point, there's a registration on the property if it gets to that point. I have had that in other municipalities and gone through the entire process. It's lengthy, although it has been reduced in recent years. So the legislation, though, is out there, and that's what we would follow in terms of that final process. The internal collection process, I'm not sure exactly what the steps we take yet, but happy to come back to you with that.
So, just out of curiosity, through you, Mr. Chair, Angela, do we have any outstanding residential non-taxpayers?
Angela, would you like to talk about that?
Is it a problem? Or is it just like a really a unique kind of situation?
I don't think it's a unique, sorry, through you, Madam Chair. I think since COVID, I think a lot of municipalities put a freeze on outstanding taxes and tax arrears and put a halt on that process. But since that time, everybody, I think a number of municipalities, from the information I'm getting, is now starting to go through the process. And we've been following, I think back in 2017, 18, arrears used to be after 3 years, you could start going through the process for a tax sale. Now it's been changed to 2 years, and that's the process that we've adopted here. It's 2 years. So we send out a notice, and we do try and be a fair process, advising them to reach out to set up some type of repayment process. If that fails, then we start the process where they start getting formal notifications, and if, again, nothing actively happens, then they go.
But my question is roughly, how big a problem is it in Grimsby? Do we have 10 of these on our books, 100 of these on our books? Like, how big of an issue is it for our town?
I would say, so this year when I started taking over for a period of time, we had about 125 notices going out. That doesn't mean that we registered them. That's really just starting the formal process, saying this is an official notification. And then that just sparks more action, and then sparks the residents to start making those payments and reaching out to the town. So it really just does initiate those conversations and formalizes the process to get some action.
So on a percentage basis, would that be 1%, 0.5% of our taxpayers? I mean, it also kind
I
of...
couldn't actually tell you the dollar amount, because each one we look at individually. Some could be, even if they're $250 on the smallest property, but they're over 2 years, they're still in the process, or they could be $20,000, they're still in the process. So I'm not really sure what that process is, but we treat them all equally in that manner.
Okay.
And again, I think it was last year, we did have a tax sale for 2 properties, so it did result in a tax sale. At the end of the day, the town will collect the taxes. It just depends on how the process looks.
Okay, thank you.
Perhaps to help Councillor Vardy, the 2022 financial statements, the audited statements, which are again attached to our meeting here, have a note attached to it that gives the aging, that says how much is current, meaning 2022, how much is 1 year old, how much is 2 years old, and so on. And it has comparatives of 2022. Wow, there's a lot of twos in these years these days, aren't there? And compares it to 2021. So that'll help to start with an immediate question. Now, that's December 31st, 2022, not today, right? And I know Angela and I have spoken about this, and what I did share with her, and so committee members, tell me how you feel, but I hear your concern, and I always said, I think it would be really good if we could have reports even semi-annually or something that show us where the receivables are in the aging. And the reason I say that is not because I'm intending that we're going to take any different action on collecting them. Staff have a process and so on, but I call it the canary in the coal mine. And that if we're seeing that our taxes are not keeping up to date in terms of being paid, then I, as a councillor, am really concerned. And at that point in time, I really need to take that information into account when I'm looking at next year's budget and how much the increase might be. The ability of people to pay, although we have the ultimate big stick and can put it in tax sale and get our money, nevertheless, it is the canary in the coal mine for me that tells me, wake up, this is something we need to be concerned about. And so it is something, I think, that we need to stay on top of.
I think it also speaks to in some ways, the health of the community. Like, do we have a large section of the community or a certain section of the community that's struggling? And what do we need to do about that? So if that's part of what you mean by the canary in the mine, I think it's one of those indicators, along with, unemployment rates and other kinds of things, inflation rates, like how is it hitting our community? Thank you.
Did anyone have any other questions or comments at this time? Then I think we'll go back and I will just, I'm not so sure that I called for the vote yet on resolve that report, Finance 23-26 on tax write-offs, and that the total tax write-offs of $4,518.54 outlined in Appendix A be approved. And I'm sorry if I asked you to vote on this already. I'll just ask you one more time, seeing we started talking and I forgot. All those in favor? Thank you. Item number 9 is correspondence, and I think we weren't quite sure where to put this on the agenda, but we wanted to come back to finance with a complete report of all the audited financial statements that, in essence, become our responsibility as a finance committee. And so that is what has been provided this evening in a very long attachment. Some of them you will have seen already. Certainly the consolidated financial statements came to us in draft, and the trust statements as well. But wanted the committee and council to be aware that those are not the only 2 financial statements that come that are audited. The downtown improvement area, for example, is audited. It has been approved. Those statements were approved by its board, and I speak to that because I sit on there. But these are the statements now in their final form. The library audited financial statements also are in form here. The art gallery doesn't have an audit done of its financials, but a review engagement, and it's really done, I think, for grant-seeking purposes. And I'm trying to remember, and then Niagara Power and Grimsby Power are attached this evening as well, so that you can see both of those entities as well as those 2 organizations are audited. They are not part of the, how can I say this? They are audited by their own firm of auditors that the shareholders appoint on that side of the equation, not the same auditors we have here at the town, but nevertheless, there is a link between them. Does anybody have any questions or comments about that information report? Member Scandinavo?
Thank you. I noticed on the town website, the consolidated financial statements, along with the trust fund financial statements are available, but I don't see the public library, the art gallery, the downtown improvement area, Niagara Power, or Grimsby Power. I was wondering if anybody felt it would be perhaps relevant to share those as well for the public to have access to.
Comments by any of the committee members? Councillor Charrois.
Through Madam Chair, thank you. So I am a member of the library board, and we actually, we were discussing financials, and I actually said that Councillor Davoli loves anytime financials are put online, and they'd be happy to do that. I believe that they are online, so you'd have to go onto the town of Grimsby Public Library's website, and they're there, right? Because they're actually a separate entity.
I'm thinking, though, it might be useful if they were all on the town's website to start with, and if they are also, if the library puts theirs on their website and the DIA puts theirs on their website, so much the better, right? It's just a second location for people to quickly find it. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, no, exactly. So that's great to find out that they're on the library website. I mean, when I was just, looking at the town website, it wasn't readily available or apparent. So yeah, I think to your point, Councillor Davoli, I think if they're on, both websites, that's just all the better. So.
Councillor Charrois.
Through you, Chair, thank you. I'm sure our CAO or CEO of the library board would have no issue with that, and I think that's probably a good idea since a lot of people don't know that it's actually a separate entity, so I'll suggest that at the next meeting.
I think from attending DIA board meetings, it certainly is their intent to get it up. They've been redoing their website, and I will say it is pretty much done in terms of being redone and reorganized. And so, yes, I will certainly kind of work behind the scenes and ask them to put it on their website. But it would still be good to have it in one central location, and the town's website is obviously that central location. Because I don't think if we were to go to the to the Grimsby Power website, I don't think that those financial statements will be on there neither. And yet it is important to still know what those entities are doing and so on. So it would be good to have the entire package that's been given to us tonight on the town's website. I guess I'll ask staff, do you need any direction from us to do that? Or do you need a formal resolution by the committee recommending that all the financial statements be put on the town's website?
Yeah, thank you, through the chair. Yes, I think that would be the most appropriate way, and what I would suggest is that we would contact the entities and let them know that that's been a motion of our committee, just so that they understand that we're putting them out there, especially if they aren't on their individual websites, because they do have separate boards. So letting their boards know and their CAOs know that that is the direction, just so there's no confusion and they're all on the same page.
Certainly could do. Then I think I almost worded the resolution, so let me take another try at it. That it be the recommendation of the Finance Committee that all of the financial statements that have been presented in this report are recommended to be posted on the town's website. Could I have someone make the resolution now that I've, Councillor Charrois, Councillor Vardy is seconding it. All those in favor of that? Thank you, that is passed. Then, item number 10, we are moving right along here, folks. Item number 10, other business. Does anyone have any new business they would like to bring forward at this time?
Just one.
Yes.
If I can, through Madam Chair, I know Stephanie's new and Angela. So we have this terms of reference. I guess, is there a plan with all kinds of things we're supposed to do? Is there a plan to come back with us, kind of a chart to put the stuff we're supposed to do with times and that sort of stuff and where we're looking at? So it looks like you might have had this discussion while you're smiling at me. So
I will try and answer that and let the two of them jump in.
I'll have to go through you then.
I guess. Certainly, Angela and I were working on that in the background, waiting patiently for a new treasurer to start. And so, yes, Monday, when the three of us met to just go over the agenda, we talked about that again, and we're getting closer. Angela had started the draft and so on, but we really wanted Stephanie to start and take a look at it as well. So talk about drinking from a fire hose. It's, here's the draft and, could you look it over and really give some input into it all? So I think the goal was that for the October meeting, we will have something come back to the committee. At the same time, so I guess how we've tried to organize it was that the terms of reference each become a point down, call it a row on the Excel spreadsheet, the columns being the months. And that's just the terms of reference for us. Then, of course, staff have things they do behind the scenes and projects they work on that may not really even, necessarily be highlighted on our terms of reference. So we wanted to also build that into the schedule so that, it makes sense in terms of the timing. If they're working on something super big, there's a reason why perhaps it's not going to come to us till November or December or whatever, right? So yes, that has actually been taking place behind the scenes, and our goal, we hope, is that we'll be able to come to the committee with that in October. Does either of you have anything you want to add to that?
Thank you. I think it's also, it sounds daunting, but also really gives the finance staff kind of a work plan and knows that sort of stuff. So second question I have is just work planning. Is there plans, two things, I'm not sure how this, the town of Grimsby works, and pardon me for but is there a plan to set two things? Many municipalities are coming out. City of Hamilton just did this, and many others are doing this. What are the high-level estimate of what next year's looking at? Like, we haven't gotten into full budgets, but what are some of the high-level pressures? What are we seeing? What kind of percentage? That's normally what happens this time of year, where finance people come forth and say next year looks like this and that. And does this council provide which a lot of councils do, say this is the percentage we're directing staff to come back at?
That's a good question. I mean, we're new as a finance committee too, so, and then on top of it, of course, we have our new treasurer, but Stephanie, do you have any thoughts you want to share on that?
Yes, thank you, through the chair. So we have been having a few discussions this week about budget, obviously. So I have a long list of things that we are trying to work through. There are budget timelines out, so we're collecting the information right now from the department heads and their staff in terms of operating and capital. And I believe, and Ange can tell me if I've got this right, but I believe the deadlines are closer to the end of October, but we will be having meetings within that period to kind of refine some data, and hopefully we'll have some progressive knowledge shortly after that we'll be able to start looking at what that looks like and discussion internally, and then at some point coming back in terms of where we're sitting at. I know some larger municipalities start the process much sooner. So we do start the process, but it's a little bit, probably not quite the same timeline as Hamilton, but we are working on that. So hopefully we'll see what those pressures are in the next month and a half or so, and then go from there. I don't believe that we have targets set, but I haven't seen anything, but obviously, we do know, I mean, I've seen across, a lot of those projections, and I know you brought up Hamilton, so they're looking at some very large increases. Coming from Peel, I know that our budget projections are pretty high there as well. So there are a lot of factors in the background that are driving those things, but again, I mean, those will come a little bit later, and then we can look through what that looks like for Grimsby and where council wants to go with it.
And Member Hutchings, continue.
Just to follow up, I just know from being on the other side of the table, which you are, sorry, we've both been on that side of the table, and it may sound self-abusive or something, but I actually liked the targets when I was in charge of finance, because it gave that out to the staff who all worked towards that target versus coming in January, February and saying, surprise, this is where we're at, so to your council. So, and you know, if it was over target, you explained why, but everybody was kind of working towards that number. And it's kind of it became a team thing to try to get there. So I actually enjoyed having them help me with the public works folks and all the other spenders. So.
I think that entire process, though, is not driven so much by the staff. I guess what you're talking about is a process where, as a finance committee and then as council, you know, there'd be a recommendation that, you know, the tax levy only be, I'll make up a number, you know, 3.5% or something like that, right? Is that really what you're talking about?
Yes, when I worked at Region and Region of Niagara, for instance, we'd come in, and usually we're in the summer, and say, this is what the pressures look like next year. High level, we didn't do a budget, but high level. And it looks like 5%, and council said, we can't have 5% next year. We've got to work for 3% or whatever that is. And we'd go away and work really hard to get to that 3%. If we didn't get there, we would explain all the challenges, you know, WSIB or employee benefits or all those sorts of things, worth some things, but just gave us a target to go away. We had an idea what their appetite was, and gave us that target, and we worked together as a team to get there. Sometimes we got there and sometimes we didn't, but at least gave us a target.
That is certainly something we could consider over the next few months. And I'm going to say, you know, as we get into October and November and into our meetings, certainly something we can work on behind the scenes about thinking about. Anybody else have any other new business they wish to raise? Then the next meeting will be on October 26th. And although we traditionally said 5 o'clock, Councillor Charwa is asking if that particular day we could move it to 6 o'clock. Does anyone have any concerns or conflicts with moving the next meeting to 6 o'clock? I think we're usually pretty good, so. Anybody have any other thoughts on it? Member Scandinavo, you had a question?
Yeah, I was just curious about and maybe we can discuss this after the meeting, but the communications protocol for the agenda and so on and so forth, so.
Yes, for sure. I know a couple of our lay members more so than the counselors, and it could be because we're using slightly different software, different communications coming out to us, that some of our lay members are struggling to get that agenda and reports and so on, but I haven't heard anything from the counselors, issues on that. So, yeah, I think that would be really good if our lay members could meet with one of our staff and just go through that process, and even have IT brought in if it is that much of, that serious an issue. I think with the counselors, we each have been given a laptop by the town with the software, and we're using eScribe and all that sort of thing, but our lay members have not been given those same tools, so they're having to do it through their own computers and so on and so forth, right? You've been given town emails, but we need to work out the glitches here somehow. Councillor Charwa.
Through Madam Chair, thank you. I'm just wondering, if there's any way that council or the committee can get something like, rather than 2 days ahead of time, if there's any ability, because there was quite a bit to read, and unfortunately, some of our committee members had to read it very last minute. So I'm just wondering if it's possible, if we could maybe release it maybe 3 days before, if it's ready, or maybe just the stuff that really will take a lot of time to digest.
Do I see any hands up to talk about this? Our Deputy Clerk, Katie, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Through you, Chair, I will say that the committee, or the agendas for all the committees of council, as well as council, are sent out 3 days prior to the meeting. We try to get it out before the end of the day, ideally, in which we did the last time. It's just with these hiccups with the agenda software, or sorry, not agenda software, the emails. So I'm thinking it might be best for this committee. I haven't received any concerns from other committee members outside of finance. So I'm thinking for this committee, it might be easiest to just send it separately instead of in the calendar invite, if that works for everybody else. It's totally up to you. But I can also speak with our IT department to see what's.
I'm seeing a few hands up. Is that like a yes, we would really like that? Yes, I'm seeing two of the lay members, which are the only two here today, saying yes, they would love that to be done separately.
That's no problem.
Okay.
No problem. I'll make a note. I'll make sure, whether it's myself or our committee coordinator, I'll make sure that it's sent out separately from that calendar invite for you guys.
I think the other part of the question was that it did get sent out Monday afternoon. Of course, it became an issue when people couldn't find it in amongst all their emails, or couldn't open it or whatever. So Councillor Charwa, though, were you thinking something even earlier than Monday? Like that technically is 3 days before. Are you thinking something like Friday?
Sorry, I think 3 days before is fine. I didn't realize, I thought by the time, it felt like the emails, through the committee were, I could feel the urgency for the members trying to get the information, and there was a lot, so I just feel for them. So if there's anything that, like I said, could require a little bit more time to digest, if we have that early, maybe if that could be sent through an email, if it's possible. It's like no pressure, and there's nothing like set in stone. Just if there's something that is available a little bit earlier, then that would be nice, that's all.
Any questions, comments from anyone else? So I think what it's sounding like is that for the next meeting, for October's meeting, a separate email will also go out with the agenda and the attachments. And we'll try that on, see how that works for October. And it'll be the next step in the progress of trying to get the information to everybody on a timely basis, right? Member Scandinavo.
Yeah, no, I certainly also sit on the other side of this table in my day job, and it's difficult enough to get these reports prepared, and I can't thank you enough for all the time you put in time and effort you put into this. I just suspect if it was at all possible, Monday's great, but if we could target for Friday, it gives you the weekend an opportunity to digest, some of the heavier materials. I mean, the agendas have been light the last couple of meetings. I mean, we're a new committee. But I suspect they'll likely get more complicated as time goes on. Again, just as given the fact that we're a new committee. There's going to be a lot of reading, a lot of understanding. So again, I'm not pushing for Friday. It would be ideal. Give you the weekend to read some of the heavier material. And I'm also not saying that we should pivot for the next meeting, because, I mean, this is sort of late notice, where we'd be almost have to have the stuff out soon. So what I think I'm saying is perhaps, like, as time goes on, maybe we can look at Friday, just a suggestion. But other than that, Monday via separate email is fine.
I think, and it's probably not something Stephanie's super familiar with, but Angela could speak to it, is that there is a process for all the committees as to when they have to have their reports done from the directors of the departments. Then it goes through another process behind the scenes, ultimately through the CAO, and then it finally comes onto the agenda and into the committee. So I know there's been some talk behind the scenes about looking at the timing of that. So I can only say that, yeah, I think we're hearing concerns from a number of us, and yet what we're really impacting is a whole process behind the scenes when we ask for it a little earlier too. So it's a big ask, but we'll just continue to keep it out there and ask our treasurer and our deputy treasurer just to, think of us when they're preparing those big reports. Okay, if there are no other questions, comments, concerns, then the next meeting will be October 26th at 6 p.m. And then this meeting, I will call it adjourned. Thank you.